Good afternoon and welcome to the Healthy Indoors Live Show. I'm your host, Bob Krell. I'm founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors Magazine. Thanks for joining us today. We're happy you're along for the ride. Today's show is a really great one. We have someone who comes from the past in the IAQ industry. I shouldn't say from the past. This is a terrible introduction, Henry, but someone who really has a long history in indoor air quality. So, without further ado, I'm going to pull you in here. So, Henry Slack, a retired engineer from the US EPA. He was back in the day. He was the IAQ program manager for Region 4 in US EPA. Spoke at so many conferences, I can't even name how many times I've seen you on stage, my friend. And always just charming and full of great knowledge. And you're so personable too.
You're very kind. Thank you.
So it's so great to have you on board. So we're gonna get into a conversation with Henry here today in today's show, and it'll be wide ranging actually because you have a wide breadth of knowledge and experience in the industry. But first, we have a word from our sponsor, Erlab.
Indoor air quality is now on the minds of everybody. How can we improve the air quality in general? So Erlab is a company that provides protection through filtration for your breathing zone, in the laboratory and outside the laboratory. And why we're here in the commercial space today is to provide protection for the air that we breathe. It's very important in commercial spaces, obviously, because there's a lot of people that come in and out of restaurants, schools, long-term care facilities, whatever it may be, offices. So we want to provide the healthiest air possible so we can get back to some sort of normalcy.
And there we go. Now we're official. So
right.
you're coming to us? You live in Oklahoma, is that correct?
No, I'm in Atlanta area.
Why did I think that? I don't
because Richard Shaughnessy worked with EPA for so long.
That'll be a good excuse. We'll go with that.
Yeah,
Yes, and
we'll take it.
So great. So again, I'm so happy that you're able to join us today. You've got just a storied past. I mean, in the indoor air quality sector, on the public side with EPA. I mean, you were there for literally decades involved with that.
Yeah.
And you're retired, but sounds like you're not that retired from our pre-show thing. What have you been up to?
Well, with COVID, I have done more indoor air for school buildings, trying to figure out what the heck is going on and do they have enough outside air. As probably every listener knows, there was a choir rehearsal in Washington State, March of 2020, where one person came in sick with COVID. He sang or she sang for 2.5 hours with 60 other people in the room, and 50 of them left with COVID, which to me is definitive proof that yes, this stuff is airborne. And if you're in a space without ventilation where you can produce a lot of particles, then you will produce a lot of particles and other people can breathe them in. So we need ventilation air and or filtration to help manage it, and or possibly UV.
So, I guess since we're going down the path of the schools right now, we might as well run with that for a sec. And since it's very timely because many of the schools in the South in the U.S. have already opened, right? They began classes a few weeks ago, and here in the North, it usually happens almost immediately after Labor Day, after this weekend. So next week, most of the rest of the schools in the United States will be open, correct? For most part.
Yeah. So if they're not closed for quarantining or
well, okay, yeah, and there's a factor right there. What, boy, this is a loaded question. What do you think we should be doing, collectively here to make these school environments okay to reoccupy? It's guess what, we're really at all cost, I believe. We want to try to avoid school closures again because that's not desirable.
Yeah, and
how do we avert that?
We need 3 to 6 air changes an hour, depending on who you talk to and what numbers you like. But I've seen as low as 3 and as high as 6 ACH as necessary. And you can do that either by, actually having outside air, as one school I visited did, or you can do it just by air cleaners. Another school I visited had recently installed it's a small private school, 60 or 70 students, and they'd recently installed wonderful mini splits throughout the building. So every classroom had a mini split, which is tremendous for efficiency and terrible for outside air. They essentially were bringing in no outside air. They had no filtration. And so I was able to say, well, get these, forgotten the number. I think they needed 15 to 20 HEPA air cleaners in each, in the building throughout, 1 to 3 in each classroom, depending on how big the classroom was. So with a clean air delivery rate of around 200 CFM. So they're not too noisy and they're not too expensive. And that was by far the cheapest thing they could do.
What they're doing in lieu of actually doing air changes, they're doing air cycles, right? And filtering the air.
Yeah,
so
but it's effective air changes because the air is cleaned. And that's the crucial thing for COVID.
And again, but that, I think one thing to point out though, going forward, is that strategy for COVID, for an aerosolized virus, obviously is a great strategy. But it's probably, that strategy is not going to work for trying to dilute chemicals in a space unless you're adding gas sorbent, right? I mean,
no, it's terrible.
It's for particulates.
Yeah, and I did an article and several talks about the need for ventilation. I still do it as an ASHRAE talk. I'm an ASHRAE distinguished lecturer, so I talked to some ASHRAE chapters, and we need more ventilation air probably than we get. I say need. We would benefit by having more. We'd have less illness inside when there's more ventilation. We'd have higher test scores. We'd have more productive workers, etc. And so a lot of people look and say, oh, we have all this outside air coming in. I can cut down on that and save money and install my amazing machine instead. And we don't need amazing machines. We need outside air much, much more.
And yeah, that's critically important. And do you think that, and I know I'm jumping ahead here, but do you think that this pandemic will be some sort of an impetus for that to actually happen, and maybe mechanical upgrades to happen in our schools? Because I mean, schools notoriously are underventilated, right?
Yeah, I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic, because the people who make the decisions in school systems, the schools have gotten a chunk of money from the recent federal bills that have been designed for COVID response, but not every school has said, oh, let's improve ventilation air. I'm optimistic that enough have that it'll mark a big increase, but will it? Maybe not.
I mean, a lot of schools, from what we've seen in the news over the past several months, have opted into some technologies that might be questionable.
Yeah, we call them. Yeah. The term I've learned lately is additive air cleaners. So you add something to the air and say, see, this will make it better. You add ozone, you add plasma, you add ions, you add something else. I've even seen duct cleaning advertised for COVID, which is not a good idea.
It's pointless is what it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a great idea if you can do it. One story I tell is I visited a business and learned that they'd had someone who came and tested their air quality. And among other things, they tested their air for oxygen and nitrogen. And they found about 20% oxygen and about 80% nitrogen, which was, very appropriate.
It was air. That would be air.
Yes, exactly. And I've always wanted to meet the salesman who sold them that testing. But it just, one challenge always in the indoor air field is, can we get enough information? But the other challenge is, do we get too much information? How much do we need? Where do we, what don't we need? Because it can be so distracting.
In the pre-show, we were discussing some of those technologies, because there's one in particular, and I don't have a problem naming the technologies either, because it's kind of interesting. The DNA-based technology that basically allows you to put markers in the air and track it. Yeah,
there's some fascinating things that have come out that are very useful. But again, when do you stop? We had a fire actually on the floor below me at EPA one year, and all the advice I could find said, you don't need to test the air once the cleanup is done. And nonetheless, we had an EPA employee, a chief who said, no, we're EPA, we're going to test because that's what EPA does. And it's like, that was unnecessary testing. And so it's finding that balance and or finding the stuff that you've tested that really makes sense to keep and expand. So what answers the question? What is the question? Well, why are people sick usually? And so you look for the obvious stuff, or instead of testing, you just, and I love this, you just say, okay, we need to take care of everything wrong in the building, do all the $5 fixes and the $50 fixes because they're cheap and worth doing anyway. And maybe these will solve the problem, or maybe it won't. And if they won't, then you go to the $500 and $5,000 and $50,000 fixes. But you sort of try to do the basics that can improve things. Make sure the outside air is coming in, make sure the filters are installed properly. I visited a doctor's office once where there were no filters. And the doctor was, needless to say, surprised. But apparently the guy didn't have the right size filter when he visited. He said, I'll just put these in when I get back. And, he hadn't come back for several months.
Well, I mean, I think you described, a process low-lying fruit, right? You go, I mean, it does make sense. I think that's the cost-effective and the reasonable approach. If you see obvious things that are readily remedied, why not do them, right? I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And try to, because that's the thing. I think a lot of people, especially on the consumer side, don't really understand that a lot of this is hit and miss when we're, doing an IAQ investigation. We may have some obvious players, but there may be some factors in that are not that obvious, right? And you have to eliminate. It's almost peeling that onion, right, to get to the result.
One of the great things at EPA is I got to speak to a lot of people in the public, and one of them, this woman called once. She wanted to test the air. We had to come test her air because this man kept putting stuff in her basement, and she wanted to know what it was and so on. And eventually I asked, well, why don't you talk to the man? Who is he? And she says, well, it's my husband. And like, she wanted the government to come out and spend thousands of dollars on testing, which we don't do anyway.
Sure.
We don't have that budget. And I apologize. I am so used to saying EPA as we, but which EPA does not do.
Well, you can say, I mean, you were with EPA for so many. How long were you with EPA?
27 years dealing with indoor air.
I can see how that would actually stick, and you'd still feel we.
Yeah,
it seems reasonable.
Very much. Well, thank you, but I'm trying to break myself of the habit. But EPA was really great experience for me, in part because we didn't test. We had no regulations. And so this allowed us to help all sorts of people who could not afford testing. And testing wouldn't necessarily help. A lot of times they could identify the problem. Oh, there's mold here and the landlord won't fix it. And so I'm like, well, you don't need to test for mold. You can see it. It's there. There's got to be a solution besides testing.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, I guess, one of to me, and some of the other guests we've had discussions in the past about testing, especially with mold, to me, it only makes sense to perform testing if the testing is going to affect what your actions will be afterwards. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. Like if if you visibly see a problem, you can see gross mold contamination on a space. Will the testing change your strategy?
Yeah.
And if it won't, then why are you doing it?
I'd like to tell two little stories. One, I talked to a woman whose name I cannot remember, as often happens, but she had specialized her indoor air firm for Fortune 500 companies. And she was in Atlanta, and so we could name Coca-Cola, Home Depot, other, other big businesses. But she said she would never send in a industrial hygienist to test until maybe the third visit, because the experience was, if you test, that data becomes part of the process of discovery for somebody suing you later. And it was just too easy to misuse in a court case. Oh, you found a cladosporium in the classroom or in the office. Like, yeah, it's leaf mold, but it sounds worse than that to a judge and jury. And so it was a great experience. The other story actually was in it's a downtown federal office building, and yet some interesting things happened indoor air wise, including one year. It was December 31st. The new cleaning contractor apparently managed to leave a hose unplugged. It wasn't completely turned off, and so over New Year's Day, water ran down 14 floors or so. We found out the building is slightly tilted, not quite level, based on the water flow. And to their credit, General Services Administration, which runs federal buildings, did not come in and test for mold. They came in with a moisture meter and went around testing the walls in different places in order to say, this section of wall is wet, so wet it needs to come down. This section of wall is dry enough, we'll leave it up. And that was just wonderful. They literally saved hundreds of thousands of dollars of testing and protected people pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it comes down to is testing. If you solely, as a consultant or even as a client that's asking for it, if you solely rely on testing to make your decisions, you're already making a mistake, right? You really should be doing the visual, the interviews with the occupants to understand what's going on, right? Or what's happening in the space, the historic data, all that information. And I think there's also this conflation a little bit between testing, sampling, I should say, the term sampling, taking a bunch of samples, versus testing can also really be looking at real-time parameters, right? Temperature, relative humidity,
right,
airborne particles, like that. To me, those are standard practice. You should come in and that's frontline. You come in, visually assess, and then use some direct read measurement equipment to see what's going on, right?
Well, you also use direct read measurement equipment because people are expecting that. We grew up,
okay.
Many of us grew up with Star Trek, and Mr. Spock beams down to this. Yeah, this is a tricorder now.
Do you have one?
Oh, well,
tricorder. I guess I'd love a tricorder.
Not a genuine one, but you beam down and Mr. Spock says, "Atmosphere is Earth normal, Captain." And I always wonder, what the hell does Earth normal mean anyway? But beyond that, you'd think they'd want that information before they start breathing down there and go, "Captain, there's a problem with air." But we need a piece of equipment to walk around with so they know we are serious scientists. We can't all be Joe Steebrook, walking around with what did he carry for a while? Or was it Terry Brennan?
He had a cardboard box, didn't he, with a digital manometer? That was his bolometer unit.
That may have been it. But somebody has walked around with a ice pick so they could draw a sample from the other side of the wall without making a big hole. Like, yeah, that can be appropriate, but it's probably not something you want to do the first time you're with the client. You want to walk around and be looking at this piece of equipment instead and saying, and then they know you're serious. Sorry.
No, that's great, because you know what? There's some truth to that, Henry. I can't deny that there is a P.T. Barnum aspect to this industry, and probably every industry, a little bit. There has to be.
Well,
but you also do glean some value from that data if you know what you're doing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's how you get taken seriously, even though what, as any good practitioner would say, what we are really doing is using our eyes, using our nose, using our ears sometime to try to get a sense of what's going on. I mean, you can hear when belts are slipping often, and motors are misfiring, and stuff being silent that shouldn't be silent is a big clue to, maybe this isn't working right. Although there's also a classic story where they were checking a radon system that had been installed 15 years earlier, and they said, "Oh, we know it's working. You can hear the fan." And then when they investigated, they found squirrels had been filling in the radon pipe with nuts and other debris. And so it wasn't moving any air, but they could hear the fan.
Maybe they could hear the squirrels too.
Yeah. So you have to, look at everything and don't just assume it can work. And this is EPA, again, something I love is the IAQ Tools for Schools Action Kit and the checklists they have, which make it possible to walk around and say, well, is this going on? Is this going on? And it really gives you a thorough idea of, oh, here's something that's screwed up.
Well, that raises a good question too, Henry. So you mentioned, EPA, doesn't do testing and didn't, historically hasn't done testing, but EPA has created some guidance documents, quite a few over the years. The Tools for Schools kit was one that's been widely used literally for decades. But that was actually its precursor was the Building Air Quality Manual, correct?
Yes. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and that was, I guess, was originally penned in like 89, 90, right? That's right
Well, I
about
started at EPA in 91, so I think we kept hearing, oh, it's coming, oh, it's coming. I don't think it came out till 92 or 93.
Okay. And
Oh,
so that's that's interesting because like back in the day, I mean, I used to teach classes on that, and we many people in the industry kind of honed our teeth on that. That was that was one of the first. That really was one of the first indoor air quality documents that we could wield, right, and walk around with,
yeah.
and it had an EPA logo on it, so there was some credibility there. Good document. So is that still applicable today?
I hope so. I mean, one of the things which was always frustrating at EPA is like, oh, there's a big problem. Well, it'll take us, 3 months to draft the guidance document or 3 months to get a contract for somebody else to write it. And then, we EPA was slow and ponderous, but I'm very proud that time and time again, we did work that lasted, for decades. Nothing slipshod, nothing flash in the pan, and just always going back to the basic principles.
So I mean, certainly, I guess. I mean, there's technology. Obviously, we've had technological advancements since that book was authored in the 90s. But I guess the principles still hold true. I would agree.
Very much so.
It's sound science principles that it's based on. Um, I guess the photos would have to be updated a little. Some of them
Yeah,
maybe.
but
You know.
that's one other thing that your listeners may not know. EPA has photo libraries and in building air quality and the I can't think of the name now, but EPA has some lovely pictures that are in the public domain you can use, and sometimes there are even nice documents where you can see the air flowing, this arrow going here, 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 and so you can show positive and negative air pressure, and that's very important when you're doing education and trying to help people get it, what the hell is going on.
Yeah, that's super valuable. I think, especially those animations, because now the Building Air Quality, that book, that was really geared toward the commercial building management, right?
Right.
That wasn't a consumer document per se.
Not at all.
Yeah. Um, and again, Tools for Schools kind of took that and expanded it to the school environment, which obviously is a little bit different. Um, you believe, you mentioned earlier that you think all schools could benefit from enhanced ventilation, which I would completely agree with. We had one of our listeners commented here. This was about the mini split comment because you're seeing a lot of mini splits being put in, and unfortunately, mini splits are for the most part only going to deal with sensible heating and cooling. I mean, there's going to
Yeah.
be some moisture removal. I mean, they're capable, to some extent. So you get a little bit of latent removal, but you're not bringing any air in with those things. They're just a recycle type device.
Yeah.
So the comment was from Terry was mini splits also quickly and easily develop mold and spread the mold and particles around the space. Mini splits also don't have anywhere near a MERV 13, let alone HEPA filtration.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah, they
So
actually
that,
have just little teeny, usually little pad filters on them, right?
yeah, MERV 1/2 probably to MERV 0.
The MERV 0.
Yeah, these are, everybody knows the salt cellar trick where you hold the filter out and bring the salt shaker up and shake salt and you watch it go through the filter.
Yeah, that works. I mean, we used to do talcum powder with it because the salt falls through even more readily, but the talcum powders, like finer things, and it just turn.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's like you understand if I can shake some stuff over the top and it falls out of the bottom, it's not really filtering very much.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
it's a Boulder filter. It stops cat hair and leaves.
Well,
Pretty.
moths.
Yeah, moths. I guess. Yeah, that's so. But that wasn't that almost the original. When you think back, right? Precursor to us maybe being directly concerned with indoor air quality. Filters originally were just to keep moths and things out of the coils, right?
Right.
Mm.
And fortunately, we've evolved since then significantly. And also, fortunately, at one time, ASHRAE had 3 kinds of filter tests, and they realized that people were saying, "Look, our filter is 99% effective based on this test," and people didn't know that was not the right test. So they condensed it down into MERV system, which is just wonderful. And now everybody can understand it, even though they're thinking about MERV Griffin or something else.
You're dating both of us because obviously I know who
Yes.
Griffin is.
Yeah.
Well, again, for general consumers, you really have to distill it. I mean, you just do because you're not you're not going to expect the average citizen to really understand a lot of it. You have to make it pretty simple, straightforward, right?
Yeah. Well, and build their trust and help them also, because every week it seemed like somebody would call who was really under stress and they couldn't do anything. They didn't have money to try to fix it. The landlord wouldn't fix it. They couldn't push. They were, they call EPA because they're really looking for help. And so I also developed what I called WEST for stress. So if you are stressed, consider writing stuff down, journaling or something. Exercise, always good as a stress reduction technique. Sometimes you can sit and meditate, or centering prayer be the name, or talk it out to people, WEST. So this, I like to hope helped people, but I learned, occasionally, and probably many people listening have had this experience. We've heard from people who may not be in the best mental condition. And I'm not going to, at EPA, I couldn't call them crazy.
Well, it's politically incorrect, but I mean, but as a consultant, I'm not going to lie. I've felt that way at times.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was a way of suggesting, well, maybe you want to talk it out to somebody, and if you don't have a friend, well, maybe a therapist, because stuff does happen and they feel bad. And sometimes that's the best thing, or they're stuck for other reasons. I talked to one woman about 20 minutes about her horrible living conditions on this farm, with various insects and molds and so on. But she couldn't leave because she kept her horse there for free. If you've ever boarded a horse, it's very expensive.
Yeah, my wife owns 2. We have 2 donkeys,
bless you.
and so I'll never retire as a result of the equine side of my world.
Yeah, exactly. Unless maybe you can find a place to live that's truly horrible, but they board the horse for free.
What I did find, Henry, just as an aside, is I found a way to make a small fortune in the equine industry. Easy way.
Start with
a really big fortune.
Yes. Yeah, that's the boat owner's method, or the lawyer who he told his client, you got $1 million, you'll never go to jail with that kind of money. And indeed, when he went to jail, he was broke.
Yep. But there's a point, the stress factor for all of these things. I mean, over the years, I've been a consultant for 36 years now, and I've seen so many individuals, where it's like it's really dramatically affected their lives adversely. I mean, mold problems or different types of problems where people's health had deteriorated, and certainly it affects their mental health. And some of it, I think, is actually a clinical manifestation. Some of it is just a stress-related manifestation. But regardless, they're experiencing it. Those
Yeah.
people are miserable.
Yeah. And so you have to start with empathy. And had a calendar once that had the quote, they will not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so certainly leading with your heart and such, and that also allows them to trust you, and optimistically you'll have a good solution. Keep your fingers crossed.
And those are, I mean, that's actually great. And I've tried to live my career that way. My fear is that a lot of, at least a sector, I shouldn't say a lot, I'm not going to qualify it, but a sector of the industry does not go by that mantra. A sector of the industry is totally profit driven. I think some are misinformed. I don't think everybody's criminal. I think some people are just, they have bad data, and maybe they have good intentions, and they offer solutions that don't necessarily aren't the right solutions because they just don't know any better. And then there is, I think, a smaller sector of the true snake oil sector that knows better and really just sells stuff that they know can make money but doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, and that was the ozone generators in the 1990s that truly bedeviled EPA. Just ozone machines were making people sick. And I had a woman call once. She had done one of their classic tests that they learned to demonstrate. You cut an onion, pass it around, and then you hold it in front of the ozone machine for 5 minutes and talk, and then you pass it around again. They can't smell anything the second time. And they say, that's because the ozone's there. But in reality, it's because the airflow was drying up the odorizers, shall we say, the scents from the onion. And she said, well, I did this, but I forgot to put the ozone plate in the machine, and it still worked. And
funny how that worked.
Yeah. She didn't quite make the full connection. But yeah, the leaders of that were definitely, I don't want to say smarmy. I'd like to find a synonym that's not quite as bad. But they were quite capable of misleading information. And you want to help out your friends and make a little money on the side, and this is a great device. And
they created an army of people actually mobilizing and marketing this stuff who truly believed it worked.
Yeah,
I think many of the people that were on the ground selling this stuff really thought they were doing something good. I don't think they had ill intent at all.
Yeah, no,
which is scary.
Yeah, well, it's scary that they were as easy to manipulate as that. But they're still. I wish that ozone generators had worked the way they said, and I wish that a lot of other technologies worked as well as the salesman says, but they don't.
So there's limitation. Everything has a limitation. There's no. I think the problem is, and maybe this may be a global issue psychologically, but at least as Americans, we want a solution that we can just, this is the solution. This is the end all answer to our problem, and it doesn't really work that way, does it?
I wish it did, but we live in the real world, and things are much more complicated. As the science paper I read once said, under the most carefully controlled settings of temperature, humidity, and pressure, and so on, the organism will do as it damn well pleases. We do not control these things nearly as well as we think we can. So we look for broad strokes, and I like the healthy homes. Keep it dry, keep it bug free, keep it clean, etc. As nice, big, easy to understand things.
Well, simple. And I think that what we just mentioned here is a great segue to things that we don't control. And we'll talk about the outdoor environment and how that affects the indoor environment. I want to remind our viewers who are here live that on the Healthy Indoors online global community, you can actually post comments and questions, and we can take those live with Henry right now. Or you can post them after, if you're watching the show at a later date on the recording. And I'll implore Henry to once in a while check back and look for comments, and maybe maybe he, still respond at a later date. That's the great thing. Your comments, if you post them in the comment section rather than the chat, it'll actually stay there indefinitely. So that's good. So you've been involved with climate change issues.
Yes.
The one thing I saw this one phrase you use, global weirding. You've got to
Hmm.
elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, it's a phrase I heard from I think her name was Hillary Levins. But what we're going to be seeing much more of in the future is weird weather, and what happens outside comes inside. My old boss at EPA used to say indoor air is as big as all outdoors, which was a wonderful way to think of it because, damn it, everything's inside. But especially stuff from outside air gets inside. And right now, out west, there are wildfires. You may have seen that an air cleaner company donated $6,000, $60,000 worth of air cleaners to a town in Washington State that has the worst air quality of anywhere. So we've got to deal with wildfire smoke for the first time in many places. We've got to deal with more flooding. We've got to deal with excess temperatures, which is like, well, is that really our job as indoor air? Well, if you're prescribing something to happen as part of the HVAC equipment, well, then yes, you do worry when it goes to 110 or 115 degrees outside. What does that mean? What does that do to you? And so climate change has huge effects on what we're trying to do to create healthy environments indoors. And for that matter, you may have the best building in the world, but if people can't get there because of flooding, because of other disruptions, look at the things in New Orleans now. You could have a truly wonderful building in downtown New Orleans that has no power and no you're just dead in the water.
Well, I mean, that brings up a big question about designing, with resilience in mind and being able to, because we are going to have, even if we were to pull out all stops, and I believe, and do every bit of mitigation we can to try to avert the climate change issue, we can't stop it. The best we can probably do is slow things down. Right.
Yes.
I mean, we're never, because there is, first of all, behind that, there is a natural cyclic change over 50,000 year, whatever cycle. You do have gradual climate change. We've accelerated it with our carbon emissions the last 200 and some years. So we could slow it down, but obviously we've got almost all of our structures on the coastal, and the bulk of our population lives on water or near water, and that's true of the planet, right? Almost, I think, 70% of the world's population lives somewhere near coastal areas.
That sounds right.
And I paraphrase the number, but it's a pretty high number. So, if we start rising the tides a little bit, this is going to affect millions upon millions of people.
Right. And they're going to be coming uphill to places like Oklahoma and Atlanta and,
Well, yeah, Miami's going to be Atlantis in 50 years.
Very likely. And some places we can protect well with seawalls and so on when they're built on granite. But if they're built on mud, it doesn't help. Miami's big problem also is that seawater percolates into their freshwater supply. And so that's I mean, we're in for a world of hurt is the problem. And so I'm working with this group called Citizens Climate Lobby to try to prevent all the problems we can and get Congress's attention. But what I want more people to do is just say, yeah, climate change is an issue. Let's talk about it. And I'm going to mention it to my county commissioner or my city council member or my next door neighbor. We literally, for this, it's the biggest problem in the world and we're not even talking about it regularly. So we've got to talk about it to address it, which will make the oil companies mad, but that's their problem.
But and what you're suggesting here is that not only do we have to try to deal with it from the top down, but from the bottom up, right? From local up, because I don't think there has been very much of a push on that regard.
But think about if you are designing a building or your own place, think about, let's put solar on the roof and get a battery so that even if the power lines go down for a week, we will have some power. I can keep charging my cell phone. I can keep some sorts of I can keep the refrigerator going without having to go out and search for ice from the neighborhood. Businesses, I can, we can do a lot of things with a little bit of solar and some battery backup to make our buildings usable and healthful.
And this is with existing technology. This is that we don't have, this is just a mental paradigm shift more than anything, right? And just
Right.
how we view these things. And it amazes me that here we are in 2021, and we're 25 years into some severe weather events. They've been progressively getting worse. It's been about that's to my recollection. The really bad hurricanes for the most part started in the mid to late 90s. They started, right? I mean, there were
Yeah,
ones
that
before
sounds
that,
right.
but it seems like they've gotten progressively worse.
Yeah.
Ida is a classic example. What, 3 days before it's a Category 4 hurricane, it's just a tropical storm.
Yep.
And so it accelerated and and went from really something that wasn't any concern to something within 24 hours that was major concern. And that's climate driven, right? That's because of
Yeah.
temperature and the thermal.
The heat of the water in the
Yeah.
Gulf of Mexico, and it's going to take a while for that to be able to cool down, even if we were to change things instantly. But we badly need to change as quickly as we can, and it's tough. But we've got. I mean, the short answer is there's nothing you can do that's wrong that'll help. But don't think, well, gee, I changed this, that's all I have to do. No, there's always more to be done. And the biggest thing to do, though, is get other people to talk about it and improve buildings. Buildings are a huge source of, right now, fossil fuel derived electricity and natural gas. So think about electrifying buildings if you're in charge of a building, and think about how you can tighten it up. And if you can get a zero energy building, that's great. The new ASHRAE headquarters, they renovated a 40-year-old building and made it zero energy, which is, my hat's off to them.
Mm-hmm. It's so doable. I mean, honestly, I was involved working along with an architect quite a few years ago, in 2009, for a local parade of homes property here in Syracuse. And the builder was a friend of mine. He wanted to try to go net zero, and I have to call this house Darth Vader green because it was a 4,800 square foot house. So that's already not really a green house. Nobody needs a 5 bedroom, 5 bathroom house. I mean, I'm just saying realistically, and it was a colonial design, so it had a lot of wasted structural material and attic space. But the point is, we were really able to get this property to net zero, or really close,
Right.
near net zero, with PV solar array on the roof, plus vertical wind turbines, plus ground source geothermal, 2 different heat pumps, one for domestic hot water, one for heating and cooling. And all that stuff. It actually got this house down to maybe a $50 a month max energy cost for a
Yeah.
4,800 square foot house in central New York.
Which is wonderful. And they've done
It's doable.
other houses. Yeah, it's doable. EPA's own green energy program, Energy Star, has, you can build a standard house, or you can build a house that uses 25% of the energy, according to using Energy Star methods, and it doesn't cost significantly more, but your bill is a quarter of what it would be otherwise. And that, because it's a quarter of what it could be, then you can put on solar panels on the roof and essentially be zero energy. So that's critical.
I find it, honestly, what really kind of upsets me, I'm going to use the word infuriates because that might be a little strong. Sometimes it does. It depends on the time of day. Sometimes I am infuriated by it, is that we have this technology. Why are we not putting solar panels on almost every building? Like, we could reduce our fossil fuel electric generation substantially just by having a lot of solar PV. We couldn't replace it with that, but we could certainly diminish the use of it. And I just don't. It doesn't seem like It doesn't seem like the I don't even the will is there to do it yet.
It's real hard for us to get rid of sunk costs. Now that I have, when I first bought an electronic phone that didn't flip open and closed, it's like, oh, okay, this is a sunk cost, and now I have to do things to justify it. And if, the old adage, if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, because that's your only tool. And so our power companies, if you had people in your class who went to work for a power company, it wasn't because they were clever and innovative and, thinking outside the box. No, people who are
Kind of,
less
they're between
creative.
they're between the lines.
They like power company work because it's very clear and straightforward. And now we're asking them, oh, don't go from the central plant. Let's go for 500 rooftops instead. And they're like, well, wait, and it's not in their general skill set. So there's a lot of other things that have kept us from moving forward on climate, but truly, buildings are the hugest thing. And one of the things I appreciate about green building programs is, for the first time, builders actually paid attention to IAQ. 15% of lead points were IAQ points. And that was a hell of a lot better than we ever had before. When what we heard at EPA informally was that people involved in buildings were saying, we're not going to support any programs that would improve indoor air in the building, because that would say we're doing something wrong now. And they really didn't want that, people to be thinking that at all.
Well, in the pushback, because I'm even thinking back to 2009. I was on this local construction site for a few months as the IAQ guy, the green building guy, and that was when the National Home Builders first came out with their green building program. So we were trying to be the first Emerald house in I think in New York, or no, actually in the country, because it just come out. And but these other builders, because it was a Parade Homes thing with 9 properties, the harassment that I would get there from these guys in 2009, and then the subcontractors coming in and we're asking them to do things a little bit different. Oh,
Yeah.
Even the suppliers, they want to just drop the materials out in the lot and let them sit in the rain, for let the OSB sit out in the rain for 3 weeks.
Change is difficult.
It is. It's not.
But we will change, or we will be changed.
Well, it's extinction is difficult too, and we've had 6 major extinctions, right, in the time of this planet, where 70% or more of the life disappeared. It's not like that's just happened before. Change. The planet's going to survive just fine.
Yeah. But we do need to take indoor air seriously. The recent UN interpanel committee on climate change, intergovernmental panel, says it's code red for humanity, and we have until 2030 to make significant changes. But the great news is we can make better buildings. Look at, again, I go to ASHRAE headquarters. A 40-year-old building got renovated. Many of us can deal with our houses. There's tons of opportunities available. So there's just we tend to be reluctant to change, and that's hard to get around.
But we're fourth quarter, late fourth quarter maybe. I think people don't realize that this is real. And what's unfortunate, that I see, is that it's been politicized. More so maybe in the United States than some other countries. I mean, many countries, but it seems like here we've politicized the heck out of it, and to our own detriment.
Yeah, and beyond that, fossil fuel companies have been big to say it's your responsibility. You are the one causing this, and therefore, you have to give up meat, for example.
Right,
you have to give up driving a car. You have to give up flying. And no, that's not what we need. What we need is for the oil companies to take the responsibility to figure out how to cut their own emissions. And, they don't want to do that. We're going to cut their sales.
They're not going, but I don't see them doing that, because they're not really financially motivated to at this juncture, right? I mean, when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, and in a way, it resembles tobacco companies. For those of you who don't know,
right? That's what I was going to say. There's an absolute parallel to the mid-90s right here.
Right. Yeah. In 1993, the tobacco companies were very, very effective at Congress. The tobacco was not covered under pesticide laws. It was not covered under toxic materials laws. It was not. It got left out of a lot of laws, but they passed an Indoor Air Act in '88 or so that said EPA can conduct research and disseminate information. So massive 5 words: conduct research, disseminate information, and EPA, I wasn't working there then, but to their credit, they went and said, well, let's investigate secondhand tobacco smoke. And it was in the spring of '93, they released a big report that said secondhand smoke is a Class A carcinogen. And lo and behold, that means it could give lung cancer to people, which meant that if, I'm Joe executive in a corner office and my secretary's sitting outside and she's breathing in my smoke and she gets cancer, she can sue me and win.
Right.
And suddenly all these buildings went smoke free. And that was just such a tremendous change that happened almost instantly. I used to work next to Ralph, who smoked probably a pack and a half a day, in the cubicle next to me. It was not great.
Non-smoking, right?
I wasn't smoking at the time.
I'm just saying, I always love that with the restaurants. You had smoking area, non-smoking area.
Yeah, there's the coach at Kentucky said, well, that's like saying, well, here's the non-pissing area of the pool.
Right.
He didn't appreciate it. But, we were able to get rid of smoking relatively quickly indoors, and suddenly everybody's air is a lot better for it. So I'm optimistic that we can make that shift. It's like we can't possibly change until suddenly, yes, we are changing. We do change.
I mean, the difference here, though, is that with climate change, and this is, I think, the profound difference, is that there is a tipping point, right? There's a certain point where if certain things come into play and like the Gulf Stream starts changing and things start changing, we're in trouble, because we're going to be past a point where anything we do with carbon emissions is going to stop it. If we're basically rolling the big snowball down the hill at some point.
Yeah, very much, and
we're close. Methane. We're closer than we should be, really, right now.
Yeah, methane in the Arctic and where it's frozen now, but can
it's
come
sequestered.
out.
It's sequestered, but when you melt the ice.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I say, we're in for a world of hurt. And the good news is, right now, the Senate is considering this big bill called the reconciliation package. Mm-hmm. It's going to be passed only by Democratic votes, but it has some climate stuff in there from what I've heard. We won't see a full package until mid-September. So, but really, it helps to let people know, and especially let elected officials know, you're worried about climate, because it's going to make things rougher for our kids. Already I was just reading, there's now a beer shortage in Britain, which
that's intolerable.
Yeah, well, you'd think so. I can't grow chocolate on my own land. I'm going to have to depend on imports. And if they can't grow chocolate there, or what if they can't grow coffee anymore? These are
real things.
Yeah, and real concerns. And we've got to be able to do what we can to address them sooner than later. And like I say, they do affect indoor air because, sure. And one of the things, should you be advising anybody on buildings, they should prepare for droughts, be able to collect rainwater for reuse. They should be prepared for flooding. So make sure that things can run off, and oversize things, quite frankly. That's 17 inches of rain in one day in Middle Tennessee. That's going to be more common. It's going to be like a terrorist effect.
Right.
So don't buy seafront property, beachfront property in Miami. Sorry to say, but
unless you only have a real short window. Like, I guess if you're like toward the end of your cycle, it's probably all right. But you've got a window of opportunity to still enjoy your beachfront before you're underwater.
Yeah, I've got a piece of equipment recently. The guy says, now this comes with a lifetime warranty. I said, well, that doesn't mean as much to me as it used to.
Oh my God, I say that now too. This, and I'm 62, so I actually look at things like, I'm thinking like I may have to buy a new refrigerator. I'm like, well, I'll only probably buy one more. It's like, and it's when you
Well, you
start
hope
to hit
so.
that realization, it's like,
Yeah,
it's weird.
but we want people to be able to enjoy things behind us and to not be suffering. So
Well, right. I
that's
mean, like the Native American seven generation mindset is really where our mindset should be.
yeah,
We shouldn't just be looking at the next quarter's profits. And that's unfortunately that still seems to drive a lot of policy and a lot of decisions,
right.
so but we haven't changed anything here today, Henry, but at least we talked about some of it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's crucial, and I'll mention again my organization, Citizens Climate Lobby, does wonderful work in my opinion. I'm a little biased, certainly, but they have 450 chapters around the country and probably one near you.
What's the website for that?
The easiest one is cclusa.org.
I'm going to actually put that up.
Hey, well, thank you, Bob.
Attempt to. Let's see if I can actually yep, got it. Here we go. Add banner and coming up.
Yeah,
That's right.
thank you. Yeah, very good.
It's just using those magic fingers. So this has been fantastic. I wish we had 2 hours, to be honest, Henry. I could chat with you almost never ending. This, you know, closing thought. Final. Is there a point that I didn't get you an opportunity to throw out there, or at least your closing thought? We've got a couple minutes left here.
Oh, one of the problems we had at EPA, quite frankly, is that government does great things for us. And people say, well, its only job is to have military. Well, no, it's got so many other jobs. But throughout the in the early 2000s, under the George W. Bush administration, we were our budget was okay. It was expanding slightly. They liked non-regulatory programs like indoor air. And then under the Trump administration, no, let's keep cutting. And actually, the Obama administration did a lot of that too. And we need, as you may have noticed, been a pandemic going on. We badly need to fund effective public health. We badly need to fund environmental protection. We badly need to fund, a lot more things than we've been paying for. And so, again, encourage local officials and say, yeah, we need funding for a lot more things than just, roads and bridges and policemen.
We need a paradigm shift a little bit.
Well, you can say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and quite frankly, we need more people to pay attention to indoor air ahead of time instead of reacting and thinking, oh God, I didn't know it would do that.
Yeah. Right. It's being proactive. What a concept. I think humans by nature we're not a proactive species though, really, are we?
No, we're not. I was thinking this morning how anything we create is going to end up at some point by the roadside.
Yeah.
No matter what sort of fantastic material it is, we're gonna throw it out. We're gonna dump it, and so we really need those things. Everything we do to be as sustainable as possible, as recyclable as, we need to stop using poisonous stuff.
Yeah, well, it's back to that whole Planet B mindset, right? We don't have another place to go. We're effectively a spaceship flying around out in the galaxy, and we have a finite amount of supplies, and that's all we've got. We got these resources. It'd be just like being on a Mars mission and you're being low on your resources. Doesn't have a great ending if you don't use your resources wisely.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot more we can do, but again, encouraging people to be thoughtful and intelligent. Sorry, that may be beyond some people's capability.
Thoughtful. Which I don't know which one's the harder lift. Probably the intelligent one, but George Carlin said it best when he said, think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize that half of them are stupider than that. I paraphrased it poorly, but it's true. People, you know what it is? People also, you get caught up in your life, and and we're all guilty of that. And you worry about your problems, your financial problems, your family problems, your whatever, your life, and the big picture is it's like it's not for me to worry about, but it actually needs to be, right? We need to take it on an individual level and start trying to affect some change from the bottom up.
Yeah, nicely put, Bob.
Sometimes I come up with pearls of wisdom.
Mhm.
Rarely, but thank you. Thank you for noticing. Well, listen, that's all the time we have today, unfortunately. But I really want you to come back in the not too distant future because I would love to continue this conversation, Henry. It's
Okay.
always great. I've been missing seeing you at in-person conferences for the past almost 2 years now. I think the last time I saw you was 2 or 3 years ago. It was a while ago, maybe
Yeah.
4 years.
It was at
So
IQA in Atlanta.
yeah, so that was So
Yeah.
it's 3 years, 4
Yeah.
years.
Well, come back to
Long time,
Atlanta.
long time. So, anyway, thanks so very much for joining us. We
Yeah.
greatly appreciate what you're
Thank you
doing,
so
and
much.
all your efforts, from your career and what you continue to do. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you. Verse Faisal.
Thanks. So we'll be back again next week for the Healthy Indoor Show. I want to do a quick plug reminder for our online global community because that's actually something that some of you may not be watching us on right now. Because while that's our primary streaming location, going forward now, we're also streaming all of our shows to Facebook and YouTube and all kinds of places, LinkedIn. So you might be watching us somewhere else. But the Healthy Indoors online global community, you can learn more about that at well, this is actually where the community is located, global.healthyindoors.com. If you're not a member, you can become a member for free. So that's kind of cool. And you really should take advantage of that because what it is more than just a repository of content. I mean, it's that, but it's a dedicated online platform that's indoor environmental centric. It's a place where you can meet other people from around the world that are interested in indoor environmental issues and network and share information, learn. I mean, it's just a lot of great stuff going on there. I'll give you the quick video plug. This will be helpful. And there it is. So for our guest Henry Slack and myself, I'm Bob Krell. Thank you so very much for joining us this week. We'll
You're
be
here.
back again next Thursday, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time for the Healthy Indoors Live Show. Take care.